From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it is Monday, March 20th, 2023. Don't worry, my March Madness bracket is also busted like most in the country, which is fine. We can focus our attention on baseball as we continue our 2023 season previews, break it down position by position. In this week's episode, we're combining the starting pitchers for the Chicago White Sox along with their starting catchers. Could this five-man rotation for the White Sox take a step forward in 2023? Can Yasmani Grandal redeem himself? Can he find his 2021 form? And can Seby Zavala be a reliable backup catcher? Those are some topics that we'll be discussing as we break down each of the starting pitchers for the White Sox as far as the projected rotation, and also take a look at Grandal and Seby Zavala later in the show. Joining me to help preview is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. And Jim, we got a lot of show, so let's go ahead and get started. And let's go with the guy who just made the most recent start in spring training for the Chicago White Sox, and that was Dylan Cease. He looked a lot better against the Seattle Mariners, and it's been a progression for him during spring training. And when it comes to Dylan Cease, the projections are still very friendly to Dylan Cease, and he's still going to be one of the favorites, one of the pitchers on the short list, contending for the American League Cy Young. Depth charts on Fangraphs is projecting 32 games started, which would be wonderful. 187 innings, almost at 11 strikeouts per 9 rate, 3.4 WAR, which might be on the low side if Dylan Cease can make 32 starts. I think the big storyline for Dylan Cease is, how does he follow up 2022? Because we've seen the progression from 2020 where he wasn't very good. He took a step forward in 2021. He took a giant leap in 2022. What are you hoping to see, or what are you expecting to see from Cease in 2023?
Well, I don't think he has to do any more. I think he's leapt to where a leap is no longer necessary. There is room for improvement, but when you look at his history and look at let's just say the walks, for instance, he's shown he can succeed with a high walk rate. There might be some ways regression bites into that, Cy Young runner-up finish, and all of a sudden he is just more of a Cy Young finalist, or you get some down ballot votes and whatnot. But basically, I think the most important number I look at is 32 starts each of the last 2 years. He has not missed a turn. So that's why I really don't want to get greedy with Cease and say well, if he could only do this, he would be a Cy Young winner. I'm just keep taking the ball. Keep taking the ball. He's proven hard to hit, even in his lesser form in 2021. He was a valuable starter for the White Sox team that just needed guys to take the ball and not miss starts. So basically, that's all I'm hoping for from him, is just that to keep that, knowledge of his mechanics, knowledge of his body, cooperative, shoulder and arm and lat and everything else, and just keep making his starts every 5 days or every 6 days.
And this is something that Ethan Katz has brought up, that this has been something at the forefront for the White Sox while managing spring training and expectations with Dylan Cease, is that they're going to be mindful early in the season the type of workload that he had last year, carrying the rotation along with Johnny Cueto, while the White Sox were piecing together a starting rotation. It seems like at parts of the 2022 season, whether pitchers were ineffective or they were just hurt, but Dylan Cease has been dependable for the White Sox, as you mentioned, making 32 starts in multiple seasons, and hopefully that is still the case in 2023. Do you think they take it slow out of the gate with Cease to start the season, where in Houston right now he's the projected opening day starter? He only throws 80 or 85 pitches in that start, and it's 5 innings. Do you think he would start that slow, or do you think the White Sox could let him try to go 100 pitches?
I think it probably depends on the per inning workload. If he is throwing, if he's averaging 15 innings per, I can see him going 6, even going into the 7th inning with that kind of, low stress, per inning, taxing on his arm. So I think, it's more a matter to me when you're watching guys early and you're seeing like the spring training of guys being pulled after 25 pitches, 30 pitches, and then, coming back for a little bit more work and then, getting pulled again. I think it's probably more the template. So I would say like if he has like a 30 pitch inning somewhere in there, he might only go 80, he might only go 5 innings at best. But it does seem like with Cease, there is a case where like, you don't want to, risk burning him out, but you also need basically every start from him and every inning from him, especially as we have these conversations down rotation about Mike Clevinger and Michael Kopech, and then the guys beyond them, to where like you're going to need those innings. Those innings are important. Getting if he's going to be looked at as number one, I don't know if we're ever going to go back to the days where it's like Chris Sale and Jose Quintana throwing 200, 210 innings between them. And, those being the guys that save the bullpen, maybe it's just not looked like that anymore, to where like those extra 30 innings over 30 starts, make a difference when you're talking about like 5 innings or 6 innings instead of 5, 7 innings instead of 6. Like, will he be a guy who can do that? Like, I'm not quite sure, because like he does throw hard and he does have long at bats and sometimes long innings with the way his command can evade him. So, I'm thinking he's more of a, there are other guys who maybe fit the horse bill better on the staff, and he's still more of somebody who, like Carlos Rodon, good Carlos Rodon, just somebody who sometimes just gets the long protracted at bats because of how hard he is to hit and how hard he is to put the ball in play against, to where like he just might be somebody who stalls at like 180, 185 innings or so and never quite gets to that 200 guy that would make the Cy Young conversation a little bit more easy for him.
I think I know what the answer is for this next question, but what's the one thing that Dylan Cease has to improve upon in 2023?
Yeah, walks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, do you think he could be this successful having a walk rate above 3 per 9?
Kinda. Like, when it comes to the way he's been throwing, and like he only allowed 126 hits. So I think part of the walk rate, you can bake that into the low hit totals and the low average against, and say like, well, just a byproduct of his approach, a byproduct of either, having stuff that darts out of the zone, or having like pitches that are foul tipped off, to where like at bats just last a little longer against him and allow, ball 3 to get to ball 4. Like that's kind of how I look at it. So, if he were giving up like say 170 hits over 184 innings with this walk rate, I'd say, yeah, it's a miracle that he had an ERA under 3. And obviously it wouldn't work like that, but just, when you have the low hit total like that, and it's been pretty consistent the last 2 years, because even in 2021, 139 over 165, that's, a higher hit rate, but still like the FIP was low. So in 2021, he, underperformed his FIP by a half run. In 2022, he overperformed his FIP by nearly 1 run, 9/10 of a run. So I think that's the balance we're kind of finding here, is just, sometimes the fortune will smile at him, and cutting his home run rate certainly helped. But yeah, I think he can strike that balance. It's just a matter of, it lowers his ceiling in terms of like innings per start and innings in a season, to where like, if a Justin Verlander type or some other, starter comes in and throws 210 innings of 2.5 ERA ball, is that enough to like just make Cease a perpetual runner up if he keeps having the same season where he is a 2.2 ERA guy, but just can't quite get to that 200 inning mark because of that pitch count he racks up?
So for Dylan Cease's over under in 2021, he had 226 strikeouts. In 2022, he had 227 strikeouts. Naturally, I would just be like, is he going to get 228 strikeouts? Just add one more strikeout per season.
Simple math.
But I'm putting the over-under at 225 and a half strikeouts. Are you taking the over or under on that total, Jim?
I'm going to say the under, just because like one missed start could be all it takes to get under that number. Well, before I monologue here, what do you say?
I think I'm going to take the under, but I still think he's going to strike out more than 200. Like the number that's in my head's like 210.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. The thing that kind of fascinates me about Cease is that his last double-digit strikeout rate in 2022 was on June 26th. So like, I'm not sure if that's a matter of like lost some of the power, lost some of the dominance, or shifted into more of a, he still was successful. I'm looking up his ERA here, just, during the second half of the season.
That were teams adjusting to him, or was it a different plan of attack?
I think they were trying to get to him a little bit earlier in the count, and trying to get to him there. But also like, I think, some of his effectiveness just wore off a little bit as the season went on and became more of a grind. But yeah, I mean, still like a 1.92 ERA. So like, if teams go at him like that, that's a case where maybe with a little bit of improvement in the walk rate, he does get to 190 innings. And then all of a sudden the strikeout number that you mentioned, where he gets to 227, 228, 229, keeps ticking the number upwards, like comes into play. And, maybe that's something where the strikeout rate doesn't need to be as gaudy in order to get to that number. That is the balance that's going to be worth, just seeing how he strikes it. But, along those lines though, over those 103 innings, 41 walks. So the walk rate was still persistent, even with those shorter at bats of just teams attacking him earlier in the count. So if teams wait him out, James Fegan had a story about this, about, teams, this dilemma that they have. Do we attack him early and get him off the hook and allow him to throw 6 innings? Or do we wait him out and get into bad counts and, strike out 13 times and he still gets to 5-6 innings? Like that's kind of the dilemma, the paradox of facing Cease. So that's why I think like, even if there is a little bit of regression, the ERA should be still pretty healthy for him, as long as there isn't something he's trying to pitch through where all of a sudden he's working at like 94 or 95 versus, being able to hit 97, 98 with regularity.
He's had back-to-back 4.4 WAR seasons according to Fangraphs, and he's still the ace for the Chicago White Sox, and we're hoping for big things from Dylan Cease in 2023. Now for the rest of the rotation. This is where we get into, I think, a little optimism, but there's some question marks, and there are some pitchers where it's not optimism. There is concern because of the question mark. So let's start with the optimistic approach first. Let's go with Lance Lynn, who has been pitching really well for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. But the big storyline is after a really rough 2022 where he got hurt late in spring training, didn't rejoin the team until June. When he rejoins the team, he is not his old self. He really struggles. He got hot late in the season, but it was just too little, too late from Lance Lynn to help out the White Sox in 2022. So, Jim, can Lance Lynn turn back the clock to his 2021 self?
I think he can. I think when the White Sox traded for him and then extended him, the guy I liked comparing him to was Bartolo Colon, just because of the pretty simple approach he has, and just throwing a cutter, throwing a 4-seamer, throwing a 2-seamer, just not quite sure which way the ball is going to break or run coming out of his hand, but it's going to be pretty easy to repeat. You can lose like maybe a tick and still be effective, because maybe if you lose a tick, you maybe gain a little bit more of a different tilt on the cutter, or on the, maybe go to the 2-seamer a bit more and get ground balls. Like there are a whole bunch of ways, if you can command 3 different kinds of fastball, to where you can just keep getting by with 3.5 ERA season. Maybe you don't get to the Cy Young finalist of 2021, but in terms of just the per start effectiveness, the ability to go deep into games because he's getting contact earlier in counts and not really walking guys. He can be quite useful to, even if he doesn't get all the way back to his 2021 self, being very valuable this rotation, I think, is just trying to make starts in the high 20s, get to 30 starts, get to 160, 170 innings of good baseball. Not 160 innings of being off for a month and a half. It'd have to be 160 innings of when you're around, you're pitching well. I think he can do that just because of the approach. And then also we've seen more of the curveball, more of the slider, more of defined breaking balls, which could give him that, even if they're not quite new tricks, just a new emphasis on stuff he's picked up recently to get hitters off him if he needs, if he's facing a lefty heavy lineup that might take him deep. Okay, use that curveball more, grab strikes, get swings over the top of it, get pop-ups. Another way he can go about his business to make him a little bit more versatile when he faces those kind of lineups, like the Astros. He might face the Astros right away, but when he was at the height of his powers and the Astros still gave him problems, having a curveball, having something that makes them change the scouting reports mid-game would be something where he didn't have that before, and maybe that extends his shelf life as a very good starter.
Yeah, Lance Lynn does have a club option, but there is a buyout for the Chicago White Sox of just $1 million. So if Lance Lynn duplicates his 2022 season, it's a very cheap way to get out of the contract of Lance Lynn. So this is a pretty big year for Lance Lynn. It almost serves as like a contract year for Lance Lynn, as Fangraphs Depth Charts is projecting 31 starts for Lance Lynn, 180 innings, which would be fantastic from a White Sox perspective, with an ERA at 3.91, so below 4, and a 2.7 WAR for Lance Lynn. What's the one thing that Lynn has to improve upon in 2023, Jim?
Just his knee, making sure that's there. And you never quite know with him, just because he's always cagey with his comments and very terse when it comes to describing anything wrong with him, because I think it's like, he doesn't want to use it as a crutch, doesn't want to use it as an excuse. Maybe it's like his, mentality of just like, well, if I acknowledge it, it's beating me. Like if I pretend it's not there, mind over body, that sort of thing. But just without knowing and without like having, like Lucas Giolito is the opposite, to where Giolito will go into detail about everything wrong with him and everything that he's doing to try to combat it. Like he goes about it the opposite way. Like, if I can solve this problem, I will let you know. Lynn is more like, there's no problem. There's no problem. Oh, I had surgery for a problem. Like, that's kind of how it goes about it. So like, that's, you're seeing like a duality there in terms of just how they, two mindsets. But yeah, that just really comes down to his knee in terms of how well he can, or how much he can impact this rotation. If the knee is bothering him, and if he's not around, or if he's throwing like 91, 92 and the life just isn't there, then yeah, it's a case where somebody else is going to have to step up. And I just question whether somebody else who hasn't stepped up can step up.
Yeah, that's a really good point at the end. And the White Sox, even though he is 37 years old, the White Sox are counting on a great deal from Lance Lynn to help secure the spot behind Dylan Cease. He is the projected number 2 starter for the Chicago White Sox. So we move into the over-under for Lance Lynn, and I put the over-under line at 28.5 starts for Lance Lynn. I think it's a bit unrealistic to expect a 37-year-old pitcher in Lance Lynn, who has had knee issues, to pencil in 32 starts for Lance Lynn. Like, I think it's a bit unrealistic. Like, something is going to bark up on him, whether it's the knee, maybe it's the back. As someone that's in their late 30s, these are things that I totally understand now from a human body perspective. So over under 20.5 starts for Lance Lynn in 2023, Jim.
I'm going to say under, and I'm going to feel like a pessimist because I don't think that number is that far off. Like if you said 27.5, I would have said like, you maybe say the over. So you did set a good number and it's in that range, but just, he hasn't done that since 2019. And obviously he made every start in 2020 and he could only make 13 starts, but just, 2021 case of just, they had such a big lead. We don't know how much it was hurting him. Like if he had to, if they needed every start, could he have delivered every start, or would you have seen like just the performance really fall off? Like, I don't quite know. And I don't have enough confidence to say like, he's better than that guy, or he's more durable than that guy. Here's a case too, where with Pedro Grifol, with Jeff Head, with like hopefully very healthy lines of communication between the manager's office and the front office, will they be more cautious about giving guys a breather? Will we see like a lot of Davis Martin or whoever's going to be in line, Sean Burke, Jesse Schultens, if he's able to be carried on the 40-man roster? Like, just, are we going to see more spot starts to help guys get by, more usage of the either the injured list or just strategic days off, to where like, oh, skip a start, we have a day off here, we have one of those weeks with 2 days off and we can rearrange things. Like, curious to see like how they're going to manage workloads for some guys as it comes up, because I don't think, the last 2 years of Tony La Russa, especially like last year, sets any kind of template for what the decision-making is going to be in this regard for Grifol and just everybody else in the whole new coaching staff, aside from Ethan Katz underneath him. For that matter, like, how will Ethan Katz's job change with better lines of communication with the manager and with the front office? So it's one thing I'm going to be looking at, just because with all the ways Rick Hahn talked passive aggressively about the Tony La Russa era. I think this is the one that can offer the most in terms of just how much damage it could have done and how much damage it might be able to prevent just by being a little bit more proactive or precautionary about players playing without, like, I think we saw precautionary from the White Sox with Tony La Russa, but it's more like matter of like, don't hustle. Play, but don't hustle.
Right.
And then it didn't catch up. So hopefully it's a case of, like, Rick Hahn saying we want to see 100% from guys who are on the field. And if they have to manage guys to remain 100% or 95% to where it all looks the same, I want to see how that looks.
I'm going to take the under. He made 28 starts in 2021. That's why I put this number at 28.5. I'm thinking 27, 28 starts for Lance Lynn. And obviously we would like to see more, but I'm just trying to be realistic here, folks, that I could see a couple of visits to the IL. Nothing too serious, but something where Lance Lynn may have to miss 2 starts in a row because he's nursing some type of nagging injury and the White Sox need to give him some additional rest, so they have him for the stretch run. That's kind of what I'm foreseeing from Lance Lynn. I think he makes more than 21 starts than he did last year for the 2022 White Sox. So I've still got him pegged for 27, 28 starts, but I'm also taking the under for Lance Lynn. Jim and I are going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, but coming up next, we're going to talk about Lucas Giolito, who enters his contract year, and the White Sox having Mike Clevinger and Michael Kopech try to fill out the rest of the starting rotation next on the Sox Machine podcast. Kick off the new year with new gear built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered from the sun to the slopes with premium polarized shades, customable snow glasses, and much more. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that offers a world-class product that's just as good as any expensive pair you've worn. Durable frames and extremely clear optics for outdoor adventures. And that's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost and broken replacements. If you lose or break your pair, even on day 1, they told us they will send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. Wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back long after you purchase. With Shady Rays, you can look good and feel good. To date, they have donated over 20 million meals to fight hunger with Feeding America. If you don't love them, exchange them for a new pair or return them for free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop with Shady Rays. Their team always has your back. I actually have 3 pairs from Shady Rays because they just look awesome, and I'm very picky about my sunglasses. Sometimes I like to match my sunglasses with my outfit. I can be that way. And exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the new year. Go to shadyrays.com and use promo code SOXMACHINE for 50% off 2 pairs of polarized sunglasses. Again, that's shadyrays.com, promo code SOXMACHINE. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 200,000 people. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, so we talked about Dylan Cease. We talked about Lance Lynn. Let's talk about Lucas Giolito. And Jim, it's a contract year for Lucas Giolito. We've seen this across Major League Baseball. For whatever reason, these types of guys often have huge years that help inflate their free agency market in the upcoming offseason. And I've got a feeling this could also happen to Lucas Giolito. It cannot get much worse for Lucas Giolito than 2022. A lot of questions leading up into the season, how he's going to take a step forward. He gained a bunch of muscle, a bunch of weight. That clearly did not help anything.
Cultivated mass.
Fastball velocity went away, and he was just not effective for the White Sox, and it looked like he took a step back after being very good from 2019 through 2021. So the big storyline for Lucas Giolito 2023, Jim, what version of Giolito will we see in his contract year?
I don't know. Like in this case, like I do not have a good feeling for Giolito. Like I have a good feeling for Cease. I have a good feeling about like what Lance Lynn is all about, for better or for worse. With Giolito, like he's kind of a mystery to me because we've been talking about his fastball velocity and talking about like how important that is to whether he is like 92 or 94 and just the extra bit of oomph and life that has and how much it makes a contrast with the changeup and the power on the slider and so forth. And just like the swings in his body, going from, heavy and thick to back to, like, when I saw the photo from spring training, I was like, whoa, like that's a lot of weight. Like, I don't know if that's like good or just like really searching. Like that's it, it doesn't inspire that much confidence when you're like swinging, to me at least, like swinging in weight that much. Like that just strikes me as like overcorrecting. And, maybe it's not just to my eye, to my, like, just, everything I kind of know about, weight gain and training, just like to go to one extreme and then the other, it reminds me of like just the method actors of, bulking up for a role. And then, like Christian Bale and The Machinist, like, going down to, seeing all ribs and just like, that can't be healthy. So that's what just, it strikes me as like, man, he's either really driven or really, throwing himself into whatever could possibly work because he needs it to work. And so that's why, like, I don't know. And I want him to have that kind of contract here because I like him as a pitcher. I like him as a person. Seems like a swell guy, a solid citizen, everything like that. So like, I'm rooting for him, but just, when it comes to gut feelings, like we've seen him improve, we've seen him make the necessary changes. So point in his favor, just the body swings. Like, I don't know. There's like a whiff of desperation, or at least just, I don't, to go into that swing, just like, that's why I just have this feeling of like counteracting the positive feeling of like, he's done this before. He can get back on track. Just, I can see, if he posted a, another ERA of 3.5 and had like another like 6th place Cy Young finish, like, sure, I see it. If he had another year where he's just kind of like a number 3 starter by innings, number 4 starter by effectiveness, like I could see that too. Like, I really don't know. I'm curious about your thoughts because I can see it going both ways because it's such a fine line that he rides.
So on Saturday, I joined Steve Rosenblum on 670 The Score, and he asked me about what I was thinking of regarding Lucas Giolito entering this season. And I think the one thing that he gained in the offseason is a renewed sense of focus. He's dropped that weight. He looks back to the body that he had in 2021. And there's so much money riding on this season for Lucas Giolito. And when he is focused, we have seen it from 2019 to 2021. He could really lead this White Sox rotation, where he was their best starting pitcher in those seasons for the Chicago White Sox. And I think he can reclaim that spot this year. That's how confident I'm in Giolito and bouncing back. It's the same level of confidence that I have in Tim Anderson bouncing back. And you alluded to it, Jim. We've seen him bounce back. It's easier to sell me on a player bouncing back if they've already done that. And, of course, I think of that ridiculous commercial from Guarantee Rate.
Maybe he just wants another spot in 2 years.
Maybe he does. It'll be with a different team, I think, after this season. But I think there's so much riding on the line, and Lucas is aware of that, and he understands that. So with that renewed sense of focus, I think we will see the pitcher that will revert back to form from 2019 to 2021. And all of a sudden, it's really easy to see the White Sox front 3 of Dylan Cease, Lance Lynn, and Lucas Giolito being 3 to 5 WAR starting pitchers and being a very formidable 1-2-3. So that's what I'm expecting from Lucas Giolito. Of course, with the caveat, if he stays healthy. But health hasn't been that big of a factor for Lucas Giolito. Yes, he goes in the IL time to time from hamstring issues or whatever nagging injuries. But so far in his White Sox career, for the most part, when you play 162 games, you can count on 170-plus innings from Lucas Giolito, and that's a little bit foreshadowing of a topic coming here in a moment. But before we get to that moment, Jim, the one thing to improve upon, I'm going to guess again, just like I did for Dylan Cease, is it fastball velocity or is it something else that he's got to improve upon?
I think power would be the one, like, or just, a way to, if he doesn't have the power of like 94 to 95, even touching 96 at times when he's like amped up, then just a way to counteract that. Better breaking ball. Like the slider is kind of a meh pitch, but just having a different way to go about his business. If he doesn't have that, it's like, there are 2 ways to attack his offseason. One is to reestablish that velocity, and the other is to come up with a different plan of attack. And I'm hoping the fastball velocity is a much straighter, course towards above averageness. So I'm hoping for that. But yeah, it just has to be one of the two things.
Yeah, I think it's if he regains the fastball velocity and he can, that difference in speed between his still excellent changeup. The changeup was good last year. The fastball and slider were not. You cannot be a one-pitch pitcher in the major leagues as far as a starter, and your best pitch is a changeup that can't build off of anything else that you're throwing. So if he can at least get his fastball back on track and have two above-average pitchers, and then throw the slider that I still don't have a good feeling in spring training if this pitch is improved upon. That's an unknown. We won't know until we start playing regular season games if we're starting to see a better version of a slider or breaking pitches from Lucas Giolito. So he's got a really good third offering. But if he could regain that fastball velocity, and I'm talking 94 miles per hour, if he can average 94 miles per hour in 2023, I think he definitely goes back to his form from 2019 to 2021. And that form of Lucas Giolito entering free agency at age 29 makes a lot of money. A lot of money in the offseason as a free agent starting pitcher. So let's go to the over-under. And as I foreshadowed just a moment ago, I have the over-under at 175 and a half innings for Lucas Giolito. Are you taking the over or the under, Jim?
Once again, taking the under because it's just a touch too high. Just, when you look at his track record, 173, 176, 178, 161 with his full seasons. And just like, if any one of those seasons like crossed 180, 100 or crossed like 185 for one season, I could see like having the upwards wiggle room to say like, yeah, he can get to 176 innings, like, sure. But, without that one season to kind of nudge, I guess the Overton window of his in-season durability that far, like I would just say under and just think like, 170 to 175 is more the target.
My gut is over. I think he leads the White Sox starting pitchers in innings this year.
I like it. Yeah, I like your optimism because I can see it. I just can't quite get there myself, but I'm hoping to see what you're seeing.
Yeah, again, good reason for Lucas Giolito personally, as you mentioned. We're rooting for you, Lucas, and we're rooting for you to make a lot of money because we know that baseball is a business, and you're currently with a franchise that doesn't like to sign starting pitchers to that type of money. If you deserve or earn that type of money, it's because you had a monster 2023 season, and that would help the White Sox greatly. So that's what I'm expecting to see from Lucas Giolito this upcoming year. All right, so those are the two starting pitchers, Lance Lynn and Lucas Giolito. More optimistic about them bouncing back from 2022, even though they got question marks. Let's talk about the back end of the rotation. And we're going to be talking about Mike Clevinger here. We're going to talk about Mike Clevinger on the field. Watching him in spring training in his last start against the Chicago Cubs, I noticed something, Jim, that when Clevinger he overthrew sometimes and he over-rotated on his plant leg, on his left leg. And it looked like he may have twisted a little too far when getting his hip through from the windup, making a pitch. And when he gave up home runs, that old man knee that we sometimes get when it's cold, that you have to do this like half squat because your knee is sore for some odd reason. When he gave up those home runs...
I don't know anything about that. I mean...
when Clevinger gave up those home runs, if you watch the film, you could see him do that half squat. Like, it's pretty clear to me that something was bugging him in his left knee, but he grinded it through, and he got through the innings that Grifol and the pitching staff wanted him to get through. The big storyline on the field for Mike Clevinger entering the season, is he good enough, and is he worth the money that they have signed and jumping the free agent market? Because he was not very good in his last 11 starts with the San Diego Padres, and the White Sox really need him to replace the type of performance that they got from Johnny Cueto last year if they're going to catch Cleveland and still stay ahead of Minnesota in the American League Central.
That is a question, isn't it? Like when it comes to just what we've seen, and here's a case where like I wish the White Sox were training in Florida just so he had data to understand. Like there were reports of him hitting 96, and if he's hitting 96, that's one big piece of just what makes him a special pitcher as opposed to just somebody who can, fill a fifth spot and throw 130 mediocre innings. So like 96 is like, okay, that's something. Like the White Sox might not have been off there in terms of like what he has left. But then you mentioned the knee thing and just, that is, I think he's good enough to help the White Sox rotation if he's healthy, because they need somebody like him. They don't need him to be Johnny Cueto good. Like they need Cease, Lynn, and Giolito to deliver like the Johnny Cueto good. Like Cueto made up for Giolito basically. Like in terms of like they kind of shifted spots.
Good
like
point.
if Giolito were his usual self and Cueto were the guy with like a 4.9 ERA, but throwing like 6 innings a start, like everybody would have been happy with that for the investment. So if Giolito is himself and then like Clevinger just has to occupy the 4th spot, like he can help in that regard. Like mediocrity, if he's healthy and taking the ball every 5 days or throwing 150 innings, like the White Sox can use a guy like him. So I think he's good enough to help. I don't think he's good enough to be what Johnny Cueto was, just the horse that Johnny Cueto, Johnny Cueto was what he loves, a horse. like a horse. Johnny Cueto was reliable and just had a drive that you couldn't stop. And like, I don't think Clevinger's going to do that. But in terms of just giving the White Sox adequacy for, 25 starts, like maybe. Like I think seeing him at 96, like, okay, he's got that. It just really comes down to the knee.
The thing I question, and this goes right into the one thing that he has to improve upon. The thing for me is that it's endurance, because we talked about this when the White Sox signed him in November. The reason why Clevinger was not very good in his last 11 starts with San Diego to end that season, and why he was, let's just call it what it is, he was horrible in the postseason for the Padres against the Dodgers and the Phillies, is because his stuff deteriorated after pitch 50. And you couldn't have him face a lineup a third time through the order, because while you could watch the highlights and you put in the film in the first inning, he's hitting 96. You get into the third inning, he's not throwing 96 anymore. And while the first 2 innings, the curveball looks good, it all of a sudden loses snap in the 3rd and 4th inning. Like his stuff just did not hold up in San Diego. And I understand if he points to his knee issue and say, I had a problem with my knee, and that was causing the problems. Well, I'm watching you in spring training, and I'm watching you throw 43 pitches in 2 innings, so I don't think it's your knee that's the problem here, Mike. There is something else that's going on as far as the quality of pitches that you're throwing right now, and I get that it's spring training, but if you're throwing 43 pitches in spring training to cover 2 innings, that doesn't give me a lot of confidence of seeing an effective back-end rotation starter where the White Sox need 5 innings from you, my dude. Like, you can't go and throw 85 pitches in 4 innings and all of a sudden Grandal's getting someone to warm up in the bullpen. Like, that defeats the entire purpose of signing you to help out in the rotation. So for me, it's the endurance. It's a general thing. You got to prove that your stuff does not deteriorate after pitch 50, and you got to prove that you can fight the 3rd time through the order that can get you into the 5th and 6th inning of starts. If you can't do that, then the White Sox just gave $12 million to a swingman, and you already got that guy, and that guy is Davis Martin.
Yeah. I mean, looking at his numbers last year, like he had only 91 strikeouts in 114 innings, 35 walks, and hit 10 batters. So basically, like, that's a 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio you're looking at when you add in the hit by pitches, which is not what you want from somebody who used to be more like 5-to-1.
Right. And it got worse. In his last 11 starts, he only had like 32 strikeouts, Jim. His strikeout rate in his last 11 starts was 13.5%. So not only did the White Sox not do a background check on Mike Clevinger, I don't think they watched a lot of film of Mike Clevinger and how his season ended, because a 13.5 strikeout rate, Jim, that's Dallas Keuchel. And this is where my concern is. You just gave $12 million to a right-handed version of Dallas Keuchel. I do not want to have the conversation about on the field should the White Sox DFA Mike Clevinger, because he's an absolute disaster in mid-June.
Yeah. When it comes to, that performance, like I can't see it being the knee. Like, you said it's not the knee. Like I can see it being the knee. Like if he's just like pitching at 80%, 75%, like that just might not be a very good pitcher. Like he can gut through it. He can be like Mike Clevinger at 75% might be better than like a quadruple A pitcher who like, I always go back to like Dylan Axelrod or somebody like him, like that kind of typical, like can get by with underwhelming stuff at triple A, but can't do it for long at the major league level. Like maybe he's just like that better version to where like, he's get guys out one time through, maybe twice through a bad lineup. And that's all you need from the fifth starter. But just the way they rushed out and signed him, like it does give me Adam Eaton vibes of just the White Sox getting too cute, thinking like, oh, we're going to get a $20 million pitcher with $12 million. And instead they get a guy who's, typical $3 million sign, not Johnny Cueto $3 million or $4 million, but just like the guys who usually sign for that much because they just don't have that much to offer. So that's kind of where I'm at. 96 was like a point in his favor. But just, I want to know if the knee's healthy and that'll come up too with the other guy we have yet to talk about.
So over under 25.5 starts for Mike Clevinger. Are you taking the over, Jim, or are you taking the under?
I'm taking the under just because there is a chance you could get DFA'd. With Lynn, being under 28.5, like Cease being under 225 strikeouts, Giolito being under 175, like they're all unders to me, but just like slightly, like just, not quite getting there, but in range. This one, I think there's just the error bar or the range of possibilities is a lot bigger. I can see like 9 starts and then the knee flares up or just like, ooh, he's awful. Or, God forbid, we'll use Rick Hahn's word, maturity issues resurface. And all of a sudden, like he's persona non grata, even to White Sox front office personnel. So, there are a lot of ways that he can... His stay on in a White Sox uniform could be a short one, health-wise, effectiveness, other. So that's why I'm saying under and feel, pretty good about it. It's more of a case where just I can see him. I can see that mean or like if you simulate this a bunch of times, like the median outcome, like I could see it being like 14 starts just with, sometimes he makes 5 starts, sometimes he makes 28, just with the range of outcomes here.
I think the Mike Clevinger experience in 2023 for the White Sox is 5 innings, 102 pitches thrown. He gives up 6 hits. He gives up 2 home runs. It's 4 earned runs. It's 3 walks and 4 strikeouts. And we're going to argue all year long if Mike Clevinger is good.
Okay, I thought you were saying like just that one start. I was like, man, This is a very
I think that's going to be the
start is 5 innings, 6 hits, 3 runs. He leaves with a knee injury and never pitches again. Like that's a really precise bet you're making. Like this is a vision you're saying.
I think that's going to be the Mike Clevinger experience. I think it's going to be a lot of pitches every inning. I don't think it's going to be deep starts. I think he is going to give up a lot of home runs, especially at guarantee rate field, but it may not be like the 2 or 3 run shots. It might be a couple of solo home runs that, okay, you're willing to eat. It sucks that you gave up a home run, but it's not too much damage. And then we argue all year if a 4.5 ERA Mike Clevinger is actually good. Like that's what I foresee being the Mike Clevinger experience. We'll see if he can stay healthy. That's going to be the biggest thing for him. This is a big year for him because if he pitches well, he's opting out. If he doesn't pitch well, the White Sox are opting out. Like, even though there's a mutual option for 2024, it's not very mutual. So I don't think Clevinger's going to be sticking around in the 2024 season. I think he's just dividing his $12 million. He gets $8 million this year, and he gets $4 million next year. But
it's a hefty deferred salary, basically.
It is pretty hefty, but I'm a bit concerned right now for Clevinger. Again, endurance is going to be the thing. He needs to prove that he can go at least 5 innings and his stuff holds up, or it's going to be just like he ended San Diego, and that was not a good pitcher. Finally, Michael Kopech. Boy, Jim, like this is the year that we need to see prime Michael Kopech as far as his player development. And I have a feeling that if we don't see it in 2023 from a starting pitching perspective, the White Sox may just have to have a pretty tough conversation and look at the marker board and wonder, what do you do with this very talented pitcher that, one of my biggest concerns is that for a guy who stays in shape, that unfortunately his body just betrays him. Like there's just XYZ reason, something gives out on him. And it's a bit unfair because Michael Kopech is very talented. I think he's more talented than Mike Clevinger. We saw that in spring training. He threw 3 perfect innings in one of his spring training starts. The next one, he's fading fast, where he's like 93 to 95, and then the last inning, he's down to 91, and you're hoping that it's just dead arm. So is 2023 finally the year we see prime Michael Kopech, like the Michael Kopech we dreamed about when the White Sox acquired him from Boston?
Yeah, that is the question, is it not, with Kopech? Like, when it comes to the White Sox handling of injuries, like he's somebody who I wish the White Sox had a normal coaching staff, a normal manager, normal lines of communication, because like with him, throwing 25 starts, throwing 119 innings, throwing many of those innings with a knee that was not cooperative, holding him back, still succeeding, still being okay. Like I could see it going both ways. Like I could see, let's say Pedro Grifol shows up a year earlier, or Rick Renteria is still managing the Sox, and I could say like, yeah, it was worthwhile for him to make those 25 starts, even compromised, because he's healthy enough to throw it. It didn't jeopardize his arm. The guy just needed to pitch starts. He needed to make appearances, needed to throw innings. 120 is a career high, at least at the major league level. He threw 69 the year before. He was inactive the year before. So that's progress towards the goal of getting him towards like 150, 160 innings. It wasn't pretty at times, but he made it. Like he just got through the season, experienced the grind, better knows how to respond to it. I can also see him just being another case where like the White Sox were lucky it wasn't worse, because with the way they mismanaged Luis Robert and the way they mismanaged Larry Garcia and the way they might have mismanaged Yasmani Grandal and Yohan Moncada, basically treating their season like rehab stints. Like I could see it being a case like lucky that his arm wasn't compromised by his lower body being off. So like, I don't know, like in isolation, great that he got through that grind. But is it just a case where like, yeah, his body just finds a different way to betray him, and he really should have made the starts that he made, and he got lucky to get through the season in one piece? Like I don't know. And, I wish I did, just because like ideally he would be like the White Sox number 3 starter right now.
Right.
And maybe like Lance Lynn would be bumped down to number 4 with his knee concerns. And then after Giolito leaves in free agency, Kopech's at number 2 and Lynn's back to number 3, or maybe they add somebody else. Like he would be up there, but right now he just kind of feels like a number 5 to me in terms of just not number 5 in terms of talent, but just like the innings, like how many innings he can contribute. When Baseball Reference has their 5 starters and it has like, it arranges them no matter what by innings, not by, ERA or wins above replacement. He'll be number 5 just because, maybe not this year because of a Clevinger, but just like he feels like that number 5 starter, just, he's never going to throw 150 innings. And so like, you just hope that 4 guys throw more than he does, so he's down in that 5th slot. If he's like in a sea of guys throwing 120, 130 innings and he, rises to number 3, there were some problems.
What is the one thing that Kopech has to improve upon?
Health, or like knee, like just stability, ability to have that power, because he can get by with just his fastball sometimes, which is remarkable for a right-handed pitcher. Like, you would think like he's throwing like 98, like sure. Like even like Nate Eovaldi had to figure out something else, because like his 98 to 100 wasn't all that special when there was nothing else there. And like he had ERAs in the high 4s and he had like unimpressive strikeout rates. And like Kopech's 98 to 100 just looks different. And then like when he has to throw a slider, that's a really good pitch. And he barely needs to throw the curveball or changeup, but he's working on those too now. But when that power's not there, he's just getting by. Like he's just surviving. He's treading water. So really just the knee, the power, the drive, to be able to, generate that velocity that makes all of his other stuff so special.
So let's go to the over under, because I'm with
the same thing I imagine for the one thing to improve.
Yeah, because I think it is health. Like his walk rate, his strikeout rate, everything is thrown off. And I think it's just because he's not healthy. And it's just like a variety of things. It's a knee. It's a hamstring. He's had Tommy John. Like, I'm hoping we don't hear something like, oh, there's something wrong with his shoulder. Like, you're running out of body parts to hurt here, Michael. Like,
yeah.
And that's what concerns me. This is a guy in his mid-20s, fantastic shape. He is what you would, if you build a pitcher from scratch as far as height and the type of things that they can throw as far as hit the velocity and the spin rates and the slider, you would design Michael Kopech. But it just, my fear is that his body is failing him in the mid-20s. And it sucks. It happens in sports all the time. And hopefully Michael Kopech can overcome it and he could reach what we all hoped and dreamed that he could be, especially when he was dominant in the minor leagues for the White Sox before he had Tommy John surgery. I think we're still hoping to see that type of Michael Kopech. We've seen flashes of it. And then, I get really excited. But then something else gets in the way or trips up Michael Kopech, and it's not entirely his fault. So when it comes to the over-under, I have 120.5 innings for Michael Kopech. You have been under 4 straight times. Are you going under again, Jim?
It's Narby's night, 5 for 5.
You are going under.
just because like it makes him have to do something he's never done before.
If he can't go 120 innings... and if the body is just breaking down on him again, Bruce Levine's been talking about this on 670 The Score for years, that he's the White Sox future closer. I think at some point you got to have this conversation. Like, if his body can't hold up for 100 innings, do you put him in the bullpen where he can make 50 appearances for you? And because he was really good out of the bullpen for the White Sox in 2021. Like, I would rather have him be a starting pitcher because, again, he's shown flashes of being incredibly dominant. Just put in the film last year in May at Yankee Stadium where he was phenomenal against the New York Yankees. He can do it. It's just, can the body hold up? And I think I want to be optimistic here. I'm going to say over. There's not a lot backing me up here. There's not. This is hoping, wishing, praying that Michael Kopech throws more innings than Mike Clevinger. But if Kopech does not throw more innings than Mike Clevinger because of injuries, then there is a difficult conversation that needs to be had in the offseason of what is best for Michael Kopech and what is best for the Chicago White Sox, because you cannot continue doing this song and dance of not knowing exactly what Michael Kopech can provide you when it comes to roster construction.
I agree. And like, I like the over, like I can see it. It's just, because he's been a tease for his whole career, like, for reasons, some out of his control, some like, he had some, with the opting out of the COVID season, like he had some, personal items to attend to, like personal matters to attend to where just like, he's lived a life. We'll put it that way. Like he's lived a life in his, 26, 27 years we're talking about. So yeah, just, it's been a case where like he's, some of it's been body, some of it's been having to get priorities in order. So I just want him to show me before like I put theoretical money on it, which I don't do, but so that's why I say under. I feel like exceptionally pessimistic, but most cases just like, it's just a little under, not in this case, but like Clevinger, I can see the under being the median under case being like far under, just because of all the ways his body has betrayed him. And like, should there be some damage from the way the White Sox handled him last year? Like, I don't quite know. So yeah.
That's the projected White Sox starting rotation. So we're pretty confident in the front three and Dylan Cease, Lance Lynn, and Lucas Giolito. There are some big questions at the back end of the starting rotation. As far as the guys that could fill in as the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th starter for the White Sox, we're going to have those conversations next week when we talk about the bullpen, because these guys could be swingmen for the White Sox, at least out of the bullpen to start the 2023 season. So that is the starting pitchers. Jim and I are going to take one more quick break for a word from our sponsors, but coming up next, we're going to talk about the projected starting catcher for the White Sox, Yasmani Grandal, and his projected backup, Seby Zavala, next on the Sox Machine Podcast. Welcome back to the Sox Machine Podcast. All right, the last of the position players, and we paired them up with the starting pitchers because they're going to be working with the starting pitchers a lot, and that is the White Sox catching situation. And it is Yasmani Grandal as a projected starter for the White Sox, and his projected backup is Seby Zavala. And when it comes to Yasmani Grandal, I think the big storyline for him, because this is also a contract year, just like Lucas Giolito for Yasmani Grandal, this is the last year of his deal with the Chicago White Sox. He's an aging catcher. I do not think he's going to be signing $18 million contracts in the future, but how he plays in 2023 can drastically change the type of short-term contracts he signs in the near future, Jim. For Grandal, can he fight off age regression one more season?
Well, when you say it that way, like, he didn't fight off age regression last season. He succumbed to it. He collapsed. He cried uncle, everything like that. So, like, you know, can he do it when he didn't do it last year? Can he have the dead cat bounce, you know, is another way to put it. I think he can. Like, again, going back to the Tony La Russa, you know, administration handling of injuries, like, he should not have been playing probably in the state that he was playing. It looked like a rehab start. Like, he looked like he was just, I'm around the corner, getting a feel for it. Like, I'm not starting and catching enough. Like, Reese McGuire's playing too often, and that's why I'm not finding my groove. Like, I don't, you know, I think it's pride talking. I think it's just, you know, like the case of just trying to will himself into being that all-star catcher that he had been, even like the year before, coming back from the knee surgery. Like, he was awesome. So, like, I don't know if, like, a different manager, he has a better year, has like an ordinary year, has a case where he misses some time and McGuire has to pick up the slack, or Seby Zavala comes in, what have you. But, like, he doesn't drag the position through the depths that it went to because there's an adult in charge who can ultimately say, like, nope, you've had enough, to the injured list you go. So yeah, that's my big question. Like, and I think he's probably the biggest poster boy for it because I can see a case where his knee's healthy, his back's healthy, there's no shift, and he's fine. Like, he's still a bit frustrating at times with pass balls, and he allows more stolen bases than you want to, in part because, like, Michael Kopech isn't fast to the plate, but he's good. He's fine. He's what you want from a catcher because there aren't a whole lot of good catchers in the league. So I can see it. So I guess in this case, I'm a little bit more optimistic, but partially because, like, he's reframed the conversation so greatly that below average would be fine for what we saw last year and just how bad it can get.
93 games in 2021, 23 homers, 62 RBIs, a 940 OPS, a 3.6 WAR season. 2022, 99 games played, 5 home runs, 27 RBIs, a 570 OPS, a negative 0.4 WAR, according to Fangraphs. That is a 4 WAR difference from year to year. I think it's safe to say that somewhere in between in 2021 and 2022, Grandal will find himself in 2023. And one of the benefits of the White Sox hiring Pedro Grifol is that Grifol had a fantastic relationship with Salvador Perez, and Salvador Perez has been aging well despite the injuries, and a lot of that, yeah, is offense.
And the crushing weight of P. Knowles' hatred.
Yeah, and Perez is an excellent hitting catcher, and honestly, that's what the White Sox need. They need Grandal to be, again, an excellent hitting catcher. I think the one thing he's got to improve upon is everything from 2022. I mean, he didn't do anything well. You know, his walk rate was cut in half from 2021, still above 10% because it's Yasmani Grandal, but his on-base percentage was just 301 in 2022. Like, it is strictly across the board, but I'm wondering here with the shift ban, if all of a sudden Yasmani Grandal picks up more singles and he sees a BABIP increase, and maybe that gives him more confidence here, and working with Grifol, that we see a dead cat bounce from Yasmani Grandal in 2023. And I am picking that phrase specifically, Jim, because that's what I think it would be. The end of the road is near for catchers like Yasmani Grandal, where they transition into becoming backup catchers, really good backup catchers, but backup catchers later part of their career. And that's where I'm kind of seeing Yasmani Grandal here as the transition, that I think he's got one more good year offensively. But as far as what he's got to improve upon, I mean, it's simple. It's across the board. All numbers have to improve.
Yeah, and it comes down to, like we've had this conversation with other guys, the base. Knees and back. And, Andrew Vaughn's just come up with him having a sore back in spring training. And we dodged like a 5-minute Josh monologue at the top of the show by just getting the preview. But just knees and back are important for like having any kind of dynamic impact at the plate. So, yeah, I'm hoping that he'll benefit from better lines of communication. Yeah, he should benefit from the shift. Like, he doesn't have to change his approach at all. He can just grip and rip and just try to hit 15 to 20 homers and draw a few more walks because he's a little bit more dangerous. My fear would be like if he's getting more singles, he's on the bases more. We have to watch him run more. I guess it's a case where like he could hurt himself there. And I guess Joe McEwing is not here anymore. So we'll find out if Eddie Rodriguez is a similar thing to where he's sending guys to his death at home plate. But don't like watching him run, but I'm hoping to see him have to run more. Maybe he'll have to trot more because there'll be other guys will be homering behind him. But yeah, I'm strangely optimistic about him. Just because I think, because of the way the game is helping him out, the game's meeting him halfway, say like, only 2 infielders on the right side. Assuming they don't, there was some talk about, I think it was Ali Marmol on the Cardinals said like something about like how the league will crack down on playing the left fielder in right field, shallow right field to replace the second baseman if teams start doing that because it is not in the spirit of the rule. So, assuming that there isn't a third infielder on the right side, like I can see the game helping him out, and I could see just benefiting from, all this continuing theme of just a manager who understands how healthy Grandal is or isn't, and can make the appropriate call with who should be playing.
Grandal could have a sneaky year, Jim, where he hits 22 plus home runs for the White Sox.
Yeah.
Because he did it 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, obviously 2020, shortened year, and he had 23 in 2021. Like, as far as regular season years, 5 straight years of 20 plus home runs from Yasmani Grandal. And if he bounces back, he may get to 20 plus home runs again for the White Sox and might get people to believe and bring him back on another contract. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, if that's a good idea, because it leads to our over-under. Grandal has not played 100 games with the White Sox. He fell 1 game short last year. So the over-under, specifically at catcher, 90.5 starts at catcher for Yasmani Grandal in 2023. You taking the over, Jim, or should I just pen you in at the under again?
You know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say. Yeah. Under, just because of being careful with him and being judicious. Like, that's one thing where how poorly he played, I think he can... Yeah, I imagine his pride has to be hurt a little bit, or he's adjusted his pride to say like, if I'm not playing 120 games, I understand. I may not like it, but I understand. Like, I cannot be unhappy with like the White Sox. If he gets off to a rough start, the White Sox allocating playing time quite a bit differently in May until Grandal proves that he can bounce back. Like, it's not going to be a case where he just keeps playing because he's going to turn around. Like, sometimes he doesn't turn around. So with this, with this now in his track record of just being flat an entire year, it does give Grifol and the coaching staff leeway to pick other playing time, and pitcher pairings to all of a sudden, like, it's more of a 50-50 split between Grandal and Zavala or the other healthy catcher just to get by. And then there's also the case where he just gets hurt again. The knees and back for a catcher it's a looming threat at all times, just because the nature of the job. So for many reasons, I can see him coming under. And I'm hoping it's just a case where, like, if he makes 70 starts, it's just carefully managed and it's 70 impactful starts, 70 starts of a guy who's playing well, and then the other starts are picked up guys who are also adequate second and third catchers.
I think he's got to make at least 81 starts at catcher for the White Sox if they're going to make it to the postseason. They need Yasmani Grandal in the lineup, but I'm also going to take the under. With your point of view, Jim, that's a lot of Seby Zavala.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of Carlos Perez.
It is.
And that scares me.
But a lot of catcher situations around baseball are scary.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's why, like, I think you have to lower your standards a little bit in terms of just like some catchers, like we've seen it with Cleveland. Cleveland just gets by. They pick one strength and they say like, good enough.
That's true. That is true. I guess I just got spoiled by Yasmani Grandal in 2021.
And James McCann, yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to say that, the White Sox have the best catching duo. For a couple of years there, they had one of the best catchers in Major League Baseball, and now they're kind of falling back to the pack at the position. And it's going to greatly depend on how well Yasmani Grandal plays in 2023, but let's talk about Seby Zavala, and he's the last player that we'll preview in this episode. And for Zavala, I think the big storyline, and you know what, he's had a fascinating track. I mean, we've been following Seby Zavala ever since he's been part of the White Sox organization, when it was caught us by surprise that he was outplaying Zach Collins, the first round catcher, down in the minor leagues. We got to know Seby Zavala, and here's Zavala still with the White Sox. He's the backup catcher, and Zach Collins is fighting for a job with the Cleveland Guardians, and Collins might be going to AAA. To Columbus, the AAA affiliate for the Cleveland Guardians. So congrats to Seby Zavala, but I think moving forward, is Seby Zavala a dependable backup catcher? I think that's an answer. That's a question that we're still trying to answer going into 2023, Jim.
I feel confident about saying yes, partially because of the standards of the position, like in terms of like, maybe in a different year or a different era, like he'd be bottom rung, like, maybe like, or at least bottom half of the backup catchers, still wondering like about the strikeout issue and everything like that. But we've seen him make gains. We've seen him, like the StatCast's blocking metric loves him. His receiving has improved to where like he's an above average receiver. You wish the arm were a little bit better to be like the kind of, go back to Reese McGuire. Like when Reese McGuire plays, why he's playing. Why he's going to receive well, going to block well enough, going to throw well, and whatever he provides at the plate is a bonus. Like the arm thing is just kind of the one area to where like keeps him short of being like that defensive specialist, even going back to like Cleveland situation, Austin Hedges, of just being like, why he's playing. Like you may not like that he has to come up as often as Jose Ramirez in a game, but why he's playing. And I think Zavala is close to being that guy, just more a matter of like, if he can do one thing, like if he can be like a power and framing guy or power and blocking guy, then he's good. Or if he can like throw a little bit better and just be like the glove first guy, great. But it just seems like in order to be like that clear, sturdy backup, or like at least maybe transcending backup and being like a 1B catcher for like the catchers that don't really have a first stringer. Like it would just help if he did like one thing a little better. But we've seen him make improvements. He's improved his receiving. He's improved his blocking. And to get to the next question about like thing to improve upon,
No, you're good. Keep going.
Like the contact rate, 66% contact rate, pretty bad, but he's also improved that. So it's like, it was really bad in previous years, like below 50% in some cases. So like he's made strides. Can he continue to make strides? I don't want to say a guy can't stop improving until he stops improving. Like if he's shown the ability to do it, you kind of got to give him some leeway that he can keep doing it, because he's at least shown the work ethic and shown that he's open-minded enough to receive instruction on things that he might not have been doing well enough to have a job. So hats off to him.
This is secretly a big year for Seby Zavala, because as I mentioned, while we're hoping for a dead cat bounce from Yasmani Grandal, the White Sox are not going to sign a new contract with Grandal, paying him $18+ million a year to be a catcher in 2024 and beyond. Like the White Sox are going to move on, or they're going to renegotiate a new deal with Grandal that doesn't even come close to that type of salary number. And I'm not even sure if Grandal would be interested in returning to take that type of pay cut. So for Seby Zavala, he's got an opportunity here, Jim, to prove that he could take a step forward in his development and maybe convince some within the Chicago White Sox that maybe he's worthwhile to roll the dice and being the primary catcher in 2024. I'm not trying to scare our listeners away by saying that right now, looking ahead, but that's why I'm thinking like this could be secretly a big year for Seby Zavala, because he's got something not just to prove that he's a reliable backup catcher and he's got staying power in the major leagues, but there could be a path, depending on how well he plays, that he could convince some in the clubhouse, in the front office, that maybe he should get a look at being the starting catcher for the White Sox in 2024, at least in the short term. That leads me to the over-under, and I think that could help convince some is if he does hit for power, as you mentioned. He's like a power-hitting catcher. Doesn't hit for batting average, but he hits for some thump, and we've seen it before from Seby Zavala. I can't believe he did it, but he had 3 home runs in a game. If he's going to play a lot, I'm going to put the over-under at 9.5 home runs for Seby Zavala. Are you going over or under on that total, Jim?
You know what I'm going to say? Over.
Yes.
in part to say over just once, but also like he's shown the power. He's shown the power, like even as a prospect, like the power has been there. It's been just more of a matter of contact rate in terms of just like he doesn't make enough contact or hasn't made enough contact to like just the percentage of like great contact has to be really high. In order for him to get to like 10 homers before. But like he hit 20 at Charlotte, hit 21 between Kannapolis and Winston-Salem at A-ball. You'll hit 11 in 56 games at Birmingham. So like the power has been there as a prospect. It's just been a matter of like getting quality contact at the major league level. But it's not a matter of strength, not a matter of like the barrel being on time to get lift, just more a matter of like the barrel being the right location for the pitch. But like, here's a case where like I feel like I need some optimism here because I'm not as pessimistic as like 5 unders would make it sound for this whole unit we talked about, and 6 unders when you include Grandal. So I'm going to say like I think he can get he'll play enough for one. Like I think he can make like 70 starts and get like 300 plate appearances, and also like when you see the improvement elsewhere, that he'll keep playing. And I can see him hitting a dozen homers. May not be pretty, like might be like a low average, 230 average, 280 on base percentage, like in the ugly homer to RBI ratio that I like talking about, to where he hits like 12 homers and drives in 29 runs. But I can see him hitting 12 homers. So let's say he does.
All right, I like it. I'm going to go under, but I see the path that you're talking about to get over, especially if he makes a lot of starts, or if Grandal gets hurt early and he misses a month or 2 months, and then it's a lot of Seby Zavala. You're hoping that he hits more than 10 home runs if he suddenly becomes the primary starting catcher for the Chicago White Sox. Again, this is secretly a big year for Seby Zavala to prove that not only is he a reliable major league backup catcher, but maybe he can convince some to be a starting catcher in the near future for the Chicago White Sox, as they have some transitions coming up with some players in their contract years. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening as we conclude our starting pitcher and catcher position previews for the upcoming 2023 season. Next week, it is all about the bullpens. We'll talk about the relievers, and maybe we'll get some clues in who is going to make the opening day bullpen for new manager Pedro Grifol. But if you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow me on Twitter at SoxMachine_Josh. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Apple and Spotify. If you enjoy our work and want more, you can sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine, where our Patreon supporters, they get more from us. They get exclusive content like my weekly 2023 MLB draft reports. They get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. And when we have new Sox Machine swag in the Sox Machine store, they're the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.